So let me introduce myself. My name's Tim Davis. I'm the Executive Director for Student Resilience and Leadership Development here at UVA. And if that sounds like an unusual position for a university, it is, actually. There aren't a lot of positions like mine in the United States at big places like us. So it's a unique value that we're placing both on the emotional resilience development of your sons and daughters and on developing them as effective young leaders. And that's what I get to do for a living here at UVA. It's very fun. So I started in a corporate setting for working for Procter & Gamble, and then I had a change of heart. I really wanted to go back and study what helps people thrive. So I went back and got my Ph.D. in psychology, and I studied that and got kind of on a clinical track. I used to be the counseling center director here and the clinical director at the University of Michigan. And now for this portion of my career and what I'm getting to do at UVA is really bend those things together and figure out what helps young people develop and thrive in positions of young leadership and helps them secure themselves emotionally in preparing for young adulthood. And it's a really wonderful role, and it says a lot about UVA that we've designed this kind of a role here. So I mentioned I used to work for Procter & Gamble. Anybody from Cincinnati here? Dayton. We still live in it. I used to work at the University of Dayton. Go Flyers, right? So anybody familiar with Procter & Gamble's product lines? Any guesses as to what maybe I used to market for a living? It's like diapers, detergent, potato chips, coffee. Oh, hair care, nice. Real nice. But you're right. It used to be hair care. I used to be a shampoo marketer. And I got out just in time. I did. My body gave in just in time. So first of all, congratulations. And this is a big event for you, for your kids, for your families. You don't get into UVA easily, right? We look at the complete students, and you've supported them across the board. You've supported them obviously academically and personally and in their extracurricular endeavors. Those things, those accomplishments don't happen without a lot of support from parents, from families, from family systems, from extended families. You've done good. We're glad they're here, and we're glad you're here. Here's the thing, and it's the primary message for the rest of this talk. In order for your sons and daughters to be as successful as they've been up to this point, you're going to have to start to parent them differently. For those of you who have sent sons and daughters to university in the past, you can attest to this. It takes a different set of skills to raise a healthy college student than it does to raise a healthy high school student or a healthy grade school student. And just to add a twist, it's getting harder, as if it wasn't cruel enough, right? It's getting harder, and we're not 100% sure why. But it appears that college students are becoming less emotionally resourceful than they have been in the past. So we really don't know that for sure. What we do know is that mental health data can serve as somewhat of a proxy for emotional resilience. And as a former counseling center director, I've got mental health data coming out of my ears. So let me share some of that with you. So this is a chart of the 3 most frequent presenting concerns at university counseling centers nationally. So what do you see going on here? Anxiety. Spiking, outpacing everything else, really going through the roof. What do you see back here 10 years ago in the relationship between anxiety and depression? Which was higher? Depression. It used to be, and actually if you could pull this graph out back another 10 years, you would see the flip of the other end of that chart. Nothing came close to depression. I mean, if somebody walked into the counseling center, you'd win more bets than you'd lose by saying that person's there for support on their mood. And now it's anxiety. Again, we don't know for sure what's going on there. There's a lot of us studying it. There's a lot of us speculating about it. One of my speculations is that, in part, that spike in anxiety might be due to overparenting. We know that the average age of onset is 15, down from an average of 30 a couple of decades ago. And we know that the emotional well-being of college students is at its lowest level in the 35-year history of the Higher Education Research Institute study on first-year college student, your crew, emotional well-being. So using mental health data as a proxy, it appears that college students are becoming less emotionally resilient than they've been in the past. So what can you as parents of new college students do in the next 30 days and into their first semester to enhance their emotional resilience? Well, we're going to talk about 5 strategies today. This is the best that I got, right? I study this stuff and I do this stuff for a living, and I knew I had 45 minutes with you. By the time I get done with this intro, maybe 35. And these are the 5 strategies that I want to share with you. My invitation to you is to find one thing. You don't have to buy into all 5 strategies. You might already be doing some of these things. I'm sure many of you are. But I want you to find one thing that stands out to you that you could do differently so that your student has the best chance of really thriving in their first term here at Charlottesville. So strategy number 1, give them permission to struggle. Most families of UVA students, if you're self-aware, you can see this in your systems, you're pretty high achieving. And one of the things that I've seen over the years working at UVA and previously at the University of Michigan, a very similar place, is that students of high achieving families tend to internalize kind of an unspoken rule, almost an unconscious rule from high achieving families. And that rule is, I'm not allowed to struggle. I'm not allowed to stumble. What we know, though, is that young adults can't thrive, they can't grow, they can't be at their best without struggle. In my private work, I coach CEOs and executive teams, and we talk often about the value of humility. So in today's business climate, things are moving so fast. Technology is changing so rapidly. There is so much information out there, increasing exponentially. Every 6 months it doubles. So the idea of someone as an old school heroic leader, right, thinking that they can do it all, they can tackle all the tough issues, they can provide the answers, they're out in front, that's gone, right? What I coach leaders on is the value of humility, the value of embracing struggle, of stumbling. One of the most important assets a leader can have in this day and age is the willingness to humbly say, I don't know. I need you. I screwed up. Let me get a retake on that one. That's what we're coaching successful CEOs on the ability to do. Your sons and daughters are no different. We need you to help them be humble. We need you to help them to come to UVA with the expectation that they're going to struggle, that sometimes they're going to stub their toe, that they're going to be a little embarrassed here and there, and that's okay, that you support that that's important. This is a quote from an article that appeared in the New Yorker last year on the value of adversity, and I'll let you read it yourself. Obviously, it speaks to the importance of adversity for healthy growth and development in all of us. But what I disagree with the quote in is that there is nothing lucky about not experiencing adversity, because adversity is a critical component for building emotional resilience, especially in college students. We know that if students have too few setbacks, they don't develop emotional resilience. Why? What's that? Well, they never have to. You can't develop skills around something that you've never had to encounter before. So they have to struggle to develop that ability to bounce back from setbacks. But we also know that too many setbacks can hamper resilience, because at some point it just gets too hard to keep getting off the mat, right? Well, researchers have actually studied this question of what's the optimal amount of adversity. And what they've determined is that individuals who have experienced what they call a moderate amount of stress, what they quantified as 6 to 12 lifetime negative events, have the optimal level of emotional resilience, more so than people who have had fewer than 6 to 12 negative life events, and more so than people who have had more than 12. So we need you to help them anticipate that they will struggle, that they will come up short, that they may get a grade of C or less in a class. They will lose student elections. Oh man, believe me. They will lose student elections because everything's elected here. And the number of students who come away from that feeling shamed instead of challenged is too much. They need to know that it's okay to lose an election and that they're focused on the next challenge after that. Because your sons and daughters are here to grow and to struggle as much as they are here to shine. Strategy number 2, support a growth mindset. Anybody familiar with Carol Dweck and her research? Good, some educators in the room. So Carol Dweck, in her book Mindset, The New Psychology of Success, has studied 2 broad mindsets, and all of us have these to one degree or another. First mindset is fixed mindset, and that's a mindset in which we believe that most of our capabilities, including IQ, raw intelligence, is fixed. We get a certain dose of it when we're born, no more, no less. It doesn't really change. Has anybody ever gotten an IQ test? It's nerve-wracking, isn't it? I mean, you're sitting there. I remember the first time I got one in graduate school because I was learning how to deliver them, so we had to be the recipient of an IQ test. And I remember just thinking, God, please let it be 3 digits. And it's high stakes because, like, that's it. You feel like you're getting an insight into something just permanent about you, right? And I was 3 digits, barely. Just made the cutoff. The other mindset is called growth mindset. And growth mindset is a belief that some of us, probably the minority of us have, but some of us have, which is such that all of your talents and capabilities, including IQ, can be developed and grown over time with effort. Her research has shown, Carol Dweck's research has shown that growth mindset is associated with many positive outcomes, including enhanced resilience. That's why you're here today. Less anxiety, less depression, greater academic persistence, more life satisfaction, and more personal confidence. Growth mindset. At Berkeley, an institution that we consider to be a peer institution, they looked at their first-year students over the first and second semesters, and they found that students with a growth mindset, because we can measure it, we can give them questionnaires and measure it, students with a growth mindset persistently gained confidence in themselves as they encountered the many developmental stressors and challenges of their first and second year of college. But students with a fixed mindset experienced a gradual decrease in personal confidence over their first 2 years of college when encountering the same developmental stressors. Growth mindset's even associated with increases in academic performance. A study in just this year, this spring in 2017, by the National Academies of Science and Engineering and Medicine found that students who have a growth mindset academically outperform students coming to university life with a fixed mindset. So Dweck's research has also shown that growth mindset can be taught. And that's an important piece of this. Otherwise, these are just interesting tidbits. But if we know we can teach it, we got to be asking the question, what do you need to do as parents, as support systems, in order to foster a growth mindset in your sons and daughters? Well, first, teach them about neuroplasticity. And for those of you who don't know what neuroplasticity is, let me talk about what it's not. We used to believe, as I referenced earlier, that intelligence was finite, that the human brain was a finished product once we entered early adolescence. But what we now know is that the human brain is continually changing and adapting and making new connections on our behalf. As Dan Siegel in his great book called Brainstorm says, neurons that fire together wire together. And each one of these little, I know this is a beautiful illustration, it's a lot messier than this in real life, but each one of these little sparks, those little yellow connections that you see there, that's a new connection, that's a new piece of learning happening in the human brain. 2 neurons finding a connection where there was none previously. And when we hit those same connections with new information or a new insight, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 times, guess what happens? Permanent new connection in the brain. As long as it's nurtured, as long as that learning continues, it'll be there forever. So to illustrate the value of neuroplasticity, let me tell you a little bit about, oops, got hit myself. So here's the catch on neuroplasticity. To really benefit from this miraculous process going on between your ears, you have to do things that are difficult for you. You have to do things that take you to the limits of your current skill set, that feel uncomfortable. What I often say to students is, you get smart from doing things that make you feel dumb. That's when neuroplasticity is happening. And for neuroplasticity to really benefit your sons and daughters, they will have to demonstrate a preference for complex and difficult work. And if they feel like they're not allowed to fail, going back to the first strategy, they're going to be disinclined to take on those challenges and do things that are difficult enough to produce those new neuroplastic connections in their brain. So one of the other ways that we know to help students develop a growth mindset is to praise them effectively. We all love to praise our kids. There's nothing that makes me happier than seeing my kid do something on the athletic field or in the classroom and to yell and cheer and tell them how great they are when they come off the field. But there's a good way to praise and there's an unhelpful way to praise. What we need you to do is to focus on praising behaviors, not traits. Praise effort. Praise persistence. Praise finding new strategies. Praise problem solving. Avoid praising intelligence. Avoid praising talent or ability. So this doesn't mean we should restrain ourselves from cheering on our kids and showing our enthusiasm for them. Bring it on. They need it. They want it. It feels good. It's all positive. It's wonderful. But focus on behaviors. To illustrate the importance of that point, let me tell you a little bit about a study that was conducted by Carol Dweck and her colleagues. She studied 400 students and gave them an easy test of intelligence. Easy peasy. All 400 did great. Then, she randomly assigned those students, those 400 students, into one of two groups. One group was praised for being smart, with one sentence of praise. Wow, you did well. You must be smart. The other group was praised for their effort, with one sentence. One sentence, guys. The dependent variable here is one sentence long. And the smart group was praised with this sentence. The effort group was praised with this sentence. Wow, you did great. You must have worked hard. That's it. Then they were given a choice of taking another test. And they were told that the choice between these two tests were this. One test would be easy, and they'd surely do well. The other test, they were told, would be difficult, but they would surely learn and grow. The group that was praised for being smart, 33% chose the difficult test. The group that was praised for their effort, 92% chose the difficult test. 92% chose growth over ease. And the difference is one sentence in how they were praised. Then, all 400 students were given a really hard test. This one would have made any of us get a migraine headache, okay? Designed so that they won't do well. The group that was praised for being smart got frustrated, tended to get frustrated and give up easily. The group that was praised for their effort tended to actually enjoy the test and worked harder and longer on the test. Then, and this is the kicker, both groups were given another test of intelligence, just as easy as the first test that the research started with. Easy peasy. Guess what happened? The group that was praised for being smart saw a 20% decrease in their performance on a test that was the same level of difficulty as the first test. And the group that was praised for effort increased their scores by 30%. Got your attention? It's pretty powerful stuff. So pay attention to how you're praising your sons and daughters. Praise the things that are under their control. And you'll tend to see more of those good things over time while they're here at UVA. For those of you who are interested, there's a new group, a new student group on grounds called the Resilience Project. And this is frankly a group of 8 students who were in the first year COLA seminar that I taught last fall who decided that they wanted to stay together. And they wanted to really go out and proselytize this people to this information about growth mindset and building emotional resilience. And they are looking for mass members. They're looking to build this into a community of students who can help change the culture here at UVA to one that's more prone to emotional resilience. So if your sons or daughters are interested, this will be on the slides, the website's up there. And the slides, by the way, will be posted on Facebook on the UVA Career Center website, so you can look that up. Strategy number 3, foster optimism. Now, before you all roll your eyes, think, ugh, optimism, power of positive thinking. It's not what you think, or at least it's not what we've been told to believe about optimism. This is not optimism. We know that just pasting a smiley face on yourself when things are going really bad is not helpful. This is not a Pollyanna, happy at all costs mindset. This is optimism. Yes, optimism is a predisposition to seeing what's happening that's good and that's beautiful and has the potential for growth. But optimists don't just focus on the good stuff. They can see the clouds on the horizon. They're objective. It isn't that optimists don't see looming problems. It's just that they choose to focus their efforts on things that meet 2 criteria. 1, they focus on things that are under their control. And 2, they focus on things that have high potential for positive outcome. And if you develop a lifestyle of focusing on things that meet those 2 criteria, you're an optimist. The phrase keep your head up, back to the Andy Grammer song, doesn't mean act happy when things are closing in on you. It means keep your head up so that you can see both the threats and the opportunities and you can be choiceful about where to invest your energy. Because optimists are just like good investors, right? They want to put their energy and their resources into things that will give them a good return on their resources, on their investment. And optimism is associated with a plethora of positive health outcomes, including, this is still kind of rattles my brain when I hear it, optimism is associated with less susceptibility to many forms of cancer. It's associated with better recovery from many forms of cancer. It's associated with better cardiovascular health. But the science most relevant to your students is optimism's proven impact on mood and anxiety, back to the chart that we started with. I'll tell you about a quick study of highly pessimistic first-year students. You guys know any highly pessimistic first-year students? At the University of Pennsylvania. Again, another place that we like to consider a peer. We could argue, we think it is. And at Penn, they looked at students who were highly pessimistic, the highest quartile of pessimistic students in their first year class. So again, very relevant. Tried to keep the research very relevant to your sons and daughters. So the most pessimistic students in the first year class. And they were randomly assigned to either a optimism training course, just a brief course talking about the things like we just talked about, 2 criteria for optimism, or a no effort control. Random assignment. And what they found was the students who went through the optimism training had less depression, less anxiety, fewer symptoms of physical illness, and fewer symptoms to the student health center at Penn than students who didn't go through the optimism training. So can we teach optimism? Yeah, it actually appears that we can. And the science is there to say that it'll make a big, big difference in the level of emotional resilience and your sons and daughters' ability to bounce back from the difficulties that they'll encounter in the next 4 years in college. Strategy number 4, encourage their life outside the classroom. My personal favorite of the 5 strategies. I think this one's critical. Now notice I said encourage, I'm saying encourage their social life, their life outside the classroom. I am not referring necessarily to their party life. 2 different things. We know that healthy relationships in college predict a mind-boggling number of positive health outcomes, including happiness. And I know as a fellow parent, probably at the core of all of our hopes for our sons and daughters is that they're happy. Sean Anker at Harvard has found that among undergraduate students, social support was a far greater predictor of happiness than any other factor studied, including GPA, family income, SAT scores, age, gender, and race. And life outside the classroom is what we know is really going to make the biggest difference in their success after college. To that point, at UVA, we pride ourselves on developing great leaders. If you've looked at our mission statement, there's not a whole lot there, but Mr. Jefferson was very sure that we were focused on developing leadership. My guess is that's why some of you are sending your kids to us. That's a huge part of my role as executive director in my area, is to make sure that we're putting programs in place and a culture in place where students develop into effective leaders. I get to take what I know to be best practices from my private work with CEOs and executive teams and help UVA students develop the leadership competencies and the emotional resilience skills that are most predictive of success after college. Now, the default thinking of many parents who are sending their kids to UVA is that you're sending them here to get smarter. Yeah, we'll do that too. But the scholars who have looked at what separates highly effective leaders from average leaders have actually found that that separation has relatively little to do with leadership effectiveness after college. Actually, about 15% of the difference can be accounted for, the variance can be accounted for by raw IQ alone. But one item conservatively accounts for about 85% of the variance between highly effective leaders after college and average leaders. Any guesses as to what that might be? Resilience, good, that's part of it. Optimism, part of it.
Emotional intelligence.
Thank you. Emotional intelligence, EQ. And EQ does not get developed in the library, and it does not get developed in the lecture hall. EQ gets developed organically in the context of student organizations and teams and social networks. Those are the places where the education can best take place that creates the separation between highly effective leaders and average leaders after college. Now, if I don't have you convinced, how are we doing on time? We're going to end a little bit late because we started about 8 minutes late, so we're okay on time. If I don't have you convinced, this is a list of the 12 most frequent qualities that employers tell us they are looking for in fourth-year resumes. Okay? Now, this is usually when all the cameras come out and parents start taking the pictures of this slide. But let me do a little bit of sorting of these attributes. If you look at the ones that just popped out in orange, what would you say they all have in common? People skills, social skills, emotional IQ, pick your favorite variable, non-cognitive variables, EQ, soft skills. So this is what we want to be developing in your young UVA student leaders, and you can help us by encouraging them to have a healthy, well-rounded experience outside the classroom. Now, if you think your kids are interested, and again, you can get these slides later, I'm going to be teaching 2 courses on this topic this fall. One of them is going to be in the Batten School, but they don't have to be a leadership or public policy major in order to take the course. In the 3559 course, we're going to be looking on team leadership. We're going to be looking at group dynamics, common team dysfunctions, and how leaders can deepen their influence in their teams and their organizations. We're also going to be spending a lot of time talking about emotional resilience and the kind of skills that can be developed that we're talking about in this session today. And resilience, by the way, is paired with leadership as I've designed my area, because for those of you in leadership positions, and in my opinion, you're all in leadership positions. You're leaders in your families, you might be leaders in your churches, your organizations, your workplaces. But if you don't have the emotional resilience skills to get through the tough times, when you're taking heat and when things are looking a little bleak, the finer points of leadership don't make any difference. Resilience is the foundation, and that's why we start on that. Strategy number 5 for you 38 Special fans. Hold on loosely. Don't assume that your sons and daughters are ready to be the CEOs of their lives. They're not quite there. They will be. They're going to need you to help them navigate the many challenges of young adulthood. And as an example, I try to help a lot of the students I work with some advice and with some strategy setting. That's the holding on part. But I'll give you a quick example. One of the first things I say to my first year students in my COLA class is that UVA just gave you a gift. UVA just gave you 30 hours a week of daylight time, prime time, that you didn't have last year in college. We only ask you to be accounted for 15 hours a week. In high school, it's about 45. What are you going to do with those 30 hours? And I tell them about the research that says students who study when the sun's still up in the sky outperform those students who wait until it's dark to hit the books. And we talk about each hour of daylight being a golden poker chip. Gambling values aside, I tell them to think about golden poker chips, and every one of those that they cash in by hitting the books when the sun's still in the sky, they're starting to outpace the students that they consider to be their peers and the other students on the grading curve. So that's a strategy. That's the holding on part. But we also don't want to overmanage them either. We don't want to provide too many strategies. We don't want to hold on too tightly. We're trying to help you set a balance between holding on, which is so important. They need that. And letting go, which is so important, and they need that. They need both. They need the holding on, they need the loosely. But if you had to pick as a parent, err on the side of loosely. It's too critical of a time for them for you to hold on such that they don't get to test out their wings and develop new sets of skills that can only come from the letting go. Now, to understand a little bit about what makes this a critical time in their development, let's build a little hand model of the brain. So everybody get out your hand, all right, put it up in the sky. Take your thumb, just lay it across the middle of your palm. Close your fingers around the thumb, and what you have is an adolescent brain. Actually, you have your own brain. This is a model of the human brain. And to get you oriented, your fingernails right here, that's your prefrontal cortex. So this is your forehead, where your fingernails are. Now, as context for what's going on in this brain of yours, all right, you may or may not know that your sons and daughters are currently going through the period of the most accelerated brain development in the human lifespan, other than infancy. All right? Now, that's a good news story, because we used to think that we got them as adults, and there wasn't a lot we could do at that point from a brain development standpoint. We now know they're a big lump of clay between their ears. You guys and we together can really make a difference in how they are formed over the next 4 to 5 years. So back to the brain. So if you pick up your brain and you look at your wrist, that's your brain stem. Okay, 3 basic parts. Your brain stem is what you have in common, what your sons and daughters have in common with all the unsavory creatures of the world. It makes you either attack or slither away, right? You open your fingers, your thumb in here, that's your limbic system. That contains the emotional center of your brain, your amygdala. All right? That's where we have most of our emotional experiences. Wrap your fingers back around it. Your fingers are your cerebral cortex. This is the rational center of the brain, particularly the prefrontal cortex, where your fingernails are. This is where problem solving occurs and anticipation of consequences of behavior, all those things that we really want kicking in with your sons and daughters. Nice little model, right? Pretty cool. Here's the problem. The limbic region in your son's and daughter's brain is overdeveloped relative to the prefrontal cortex where the problem solving takes place, to the rational center. All right? So as parents of late adolescent people, what's the implication of an overdeveloped emotional center and an underdeveloped rational center? What does it look like? What's that?
Making decisions based on feelings.
Making decisions based on feelings. What else? Impulsive behavior, risk-taking, intense emotion. They're so much fun to live with, aren't they? And what's more, when they experience a charge of negative emotion, the prefrontal cortex, to the degree that it is developed, tends to go offline. So when you see your sons and daughters get really upset and feel the intense emotions that are so characteristic of 18 and 19-year-olds, that's literally probably all they're experiencing in the moment. They might not have access to the rational centers of the brain like you and I do. But when you help them learn skills and strategies for solving problems, the brain produces new connections in the prefrontal cortex. You start to develop their prefrontal cortex. You get to help it catch up with the emotional centers of the brain. And when you help them learn strategies for managing their intense emotions, just taking some deep breaths or getting a good night's sleep, some stuff that's really basic, you are literally producing regulatory fibers that connect their amygdala to their prefrontal cortex, especially their left prefrontal cortex. You're producing those connections that we saw lighting up in the neuroplasticity slide, right? You are starting to help them form those connections. So by teaching your sons and daughters new ways of coping, you're effectively rewiring their brain in a way that helps them to develop emotional resilience and emotional intelligence. So that's the holding on part. But what about the loosely part? So this might be where well-intentioned and loving parents are unintentionally making it harder for their children to develop emotional resilience. Loosely is hard. So it might help just to acknowledge that this transition for you and your family is bittersweet. That the anxiety and some of the fear and some of the sadness that you feel are totally normal. But do your best not to confuse your need to take care of your own anxiety and your own sadness with the need to take care of them. Give them space. Give them space to struggle. Manage the frequency of your contact with them. When I was a counseling center director, probably the most frequent question I got from parents was, how often should I be in touch? And my response was always, I don't know, because it depends on a lot of different variables, but I do know that daily is too much. And with some parents, 10 times a day is too much. And with some parents, buying homes in Charlottesville is a little too close. That's funny, but true. Texting is contact. And I love you for asking that question. Don't do anything for them that they can possibly do for themselves. It's time to stop taking care of them. It's time to start just listening and offering solutions and advice when you can truly see and hear that they are just out of their own ideas and advice. Or once in a while, when you truly feel like they're on the brink, give yourself a pass and you can give them some advice. It'll probably only make you feel better, but you're allowed to do that occasionally. If you do it too much, you're going to deprive them of the neuroplastic processes that will make them more resilient and more successful. Because loosely is how those connections get developed. So in summary, if you as parents can give them permission to struggle, explicitly talk about it, give them permission to struggle, support a growth mindset, foster optimism, encourage a well-rounded and active life outside the classroom, and hold on loosely, then we really do believe that you, as their parents and their family systems, will be doing everything in your power to make sure that they have the kind of thriving experience here at UVA that we're all hoping that they have.